All my life, I was second best. I had spent years in the shadows of my sister, ignored by my parents, and dismissed by everyone who should have supported me. But when a simple inheritance shattered everything, I finally fought back. Before starting this story, if you are listening from USA, please leave a comment with number 9. And if you are from another country, please leave the name of your lovely country. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to listen to more stories. Growing up in Harrison, New York, I always felt like I was living in someone else's shadow. That shadow was my younger sister, Sorrel. The entire world, it seemed, revolved around her. My parents, Linda and George Lancaster, made it clear, though never outright, that Sorrel was their golden child. From the clothes she wore to the activities she was allowed to pursue, everything about her was special while I was simply an afterthought. As a little girl, I didn't know any better than to accept the way things were. I didn't know that there was anything wrong with constantly being overlooked in favor of Sorrel. I suppose it was just the way families worked at least. That's what I told myself. Sorrel was always the one who got the attention, when she was younger. For example, her first day of school was a grand affair. My parents bought her a brand new wardrobe, dresses that sparkled in the sunlight, shoes that clicked with every step, and a pink backpack with her name embroidered across the front. The look of pride on their faces when they dropped her off at school was unmistakable. For my first day of kindergarten, I didn't get new clothes. Instead, I wore a hand-me-down from Melissa, our cousin. The faded purple jumper had a small tear on the side, and Mom had hastily stitched it up the night before. I remember thinking, even as a 5-year-old, that I didn't quite measure up. The other kids had shiny new outfits, and there I was, in hand-me-downs. When I asked Mom why she didn't buy me new things like Sorrel, she simply said, "We need to be practical. Oriana. Besides, Sorrel's more particular about her clothes." As I got older, I tried to brush it off, but there were moments when the favoritism was impossible to ignore. When I made the honor roll in 6th grade, Dad barely looked up from his newspaper. He said, "Good job, Oriana." Then, his attention immediately shifted back to the news. The following year, Sorrel brought home a B+ in math, and suddenly, she was being celebrated with ice cream, balloons, and a hug that lasted far longer than the one I had received after my honor roll achievement. It wasn't just the small things either. I remember one Christmas when I turned 10 years old. I got a $20 gift card to the local bookstore and a cake from the grocery store. That was it. No balloons, no party. For Sorrel's 10th birthday, my parents threw her an extravagant princess-themed party. There were professional decorations, a face painter, and a new gaming console that she had been begging for. I pretended not to care, but I locked myself in the bathroom that night and cried. I couldn't help it, no matter how hard I tried to be okay with it. The injustice stung every time. In those moments, I would retreat into myself, holding on to the hope that one day things would be different. But what I didn't know then was that things would never change, not unless I made them. Every weekend, I looked forward to the drive to Seaview, Maine, where Grandma Vivian lived, her house, tucked away in a quiet corner of the small coastal town, always felt like a sanctuary, unlike the cold and distant atmosphere at home. Her place was warm both in temperature and in spirit. The moment I stepped through her front door, the scent of freshly baked cookies and the faint smell of lavender filled the air, instantly soothing me. Grandma's cottage wasn't large, but it was cozy. The wooden floors creaked underfoot as I walked into her kitchen, which was filled with the gleaming shine of antique copper pots hanging above the stove. Every corner of the house told a story of a life well lived. I often found myself sitting at her small wooden table, playing cards or simply talking about anything and everything. There, in that peaceful haven, I could forget the suffocating weight of favoritism I felt back home. Unlike my parents, Grandma Vivian never made me feel like I had to compete for her love. She always made sure I knew how special I was. "You have a sharp mind, Kalani," she would say as we played our card games, "and a heart full of determination. Those two will take you farther than you know." Her words were the first ones that ever made me believe in myself. Grandma taught me to see my strengths, even when they were overlooked by everyone else. Her wisdom wasn't just reserved for those quiet moments we spent together. She had built her own life, a life I admired deeply. She ran a successful bakery for years, something she was incredibly proud of. Never wait for someone to tell you it's your time. She once told me, "Some people will never want to see you shine, but that's their problem, not yours." I didn't fully understand what she meant then, but I did understand that Grandma Vivian had never let anyone dim her light. She had faced hardships in her life, but she had always managed to build something of her own, without relying on others. It was Grandma who first opened my eyes to the idea that I didn't need to wait for approval or permission from anyone not from my parents, and certainly not from Sorrel. I could create my own path, and I didn't need to be anyone's second choice. In the small cottage in Seaview, I found the courage to believe that I could build my own future, no matter how hard it seemed. I may not have had the support of my parents, but I had Grandma Vivian's unwavering faith in me, and that, for the first time, felt like enough. By the time I reached high school, I had fully embraced the idea that I couldn't rely on anyone but myself. The harsh reality of being perpetually second place in my family had settled into my bones. Sorrel was always the golden child, and my parents' indifference toward my accomplishments felt like a constant, unspoken reminder. So, I made a decision. I would forge my own future, one where my worth was determined by my own achievements, not by the fleeting attention of people who could never truly see me. I threw myself into everything that mattered to me. I joined every business-related club I could find, from the Future Business Leaders of America to the school's entrepreneurial team. I kept my grades at the top, pushing myself to earn the highest marks, knowing that scholarships were my ticket out. The pressure to succeed was overwhelming at times, but it never stopped me from pushing forward. Each late-night study session, each extra hour spent volunteering or working part-time at the tech repair shop, was a step closer to the life I envisioned. The thought of finally leaving Harrison and escaping the shadow of my family kept me going. I wasn't just striving for success, I was striving for freedom. The weight of my parents' expectations, their neglect of me in favor of Sorrel, was something I carried with me every day. Yet, despite all of that, I couldn't help but feel a fierce determination to prove them wrong. If I could make it on my own, without their support, I would show them what I was capable of. When graduation day finally arrived, it felt like the culmination of all those years of hard work. I stood at the podium as the valedictorian, my heart pounding in my chest as I gave my speech. My parents were there, but as expected, they didn't seem particularly moved by my success. They didn't stay long, leaving early to attend Sorrel's friend's Sweet 16 party. But in that moment, it didn't matter. The applause of my classmates and the pride I felt in myself were all the validation I needed. I had done it. I was accepted to Elmwood University on a partial scholarship, and I packed my bags, ready to leave Harrison behind. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was standing on the edge of something much bigger than my family could ever offer. I was going to create a life for myself, a life that didn't revolve around their approval. The excitement of what lay ahead was enough to drown out the familiar sting of being overlooked. University life in Elmwood was everything I had hoped for. I was surrounded by people who saw my potential, who encouraged me to dream big and aim higher. I studied business and worked part-time at a local tech shop, learning as much as I could about the tech industry. That's where I met Nathan, a computer science major who would later become an important part of my journey. He introduced me to the world of tech startups, a realm that seemed so distant from my family's expectations but so full of promise. As I sat in my small dorm room late one night, coding alongside Nathan, the pieces of my future began to click into place. For the first time, I felt like I was truly building something that was mine, a future I could control. The thought that I could create a life outside of the limitations my parents had set for me, outside of their indifference, filled me with a sense of power I had never known. When Grandma Vivian passed away unexpectedly during my sophomore year, I was devastated. She was the one person who had always believed in me. Yet, even in her absence, I found a new strength. I was on my own now, truly on my own, and it was up to me to make my dreams come true. That realization ignited a fire within me, a fire that would drive me to take risks, to push harder, and to finally build the life I had always deserved. The phone call came 2 weeks after Grandma Vivian's funeral. My mind was still heavy with grief, the kind of grief that clings to you like a shadow, especially when the person who believed in you the most is gone. I had never realized how deeply I relied on her encouragement until I felt the void left by her absence. And then, just as I was trying to gather the pieces of myself, the call came, a call I never expected. It was from Grandma Vivian's lawyer. He informed me that, as per my grandmother's wishes, I was to inherit $15,000 and her collection of antique jewelry. The words sounded surreal, almost dreamlike. It wasn't much, especially not in the grand scheme of things, but it was something. It was a token of her belief in me, something I could hold on to. I needed that reminder. I hadn't realized how much I'd been hoping for it until the news hit me. This was my one victory, my one tie to someone who had seen me for who I truly was, not the second-rate daughter in a family that only ever had eyes for Sorrel. But when I told my parents, everything shattered. I'll never forget the way my mom reacted. Linda Lancaster, who had never cared much for my success or failures, suddenly erupted. "I'm her daughter!" she yelled, her voice sharp and filled with a rage that didn't seem to match the situation. "I should have gotten something." I stood there, stunned by her reaction. For years, I had been dismissed, overlooked, and now, all of a sudden, it mattered. All the years of supporting Sorrel while I was shoved to the sidelines had led to this moment, and my mother's anger seemed so misplaced, so out of place compared to the indifference she had shown me my entire life. Dad, too, was angry, though his fury was more subdued, more passive. "You could at least share some of it with Sorrel," he suggested, his voice tinged with annoyance. "She's having a hard time dealing with Grandma's death." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Sorrel, who had barely spoken to Grandma Vivian in the last few years of her life, who had spent most of her time wrapped in her own world, was now the one being pitied. It was like the universe had turned everything upside down, and I was left to pick up the pieces. But I wasn't going to give in, for once. I wasn't going to let them take something from me. I wasn't going to share what was rightfully mine just to placate their feelings. This wasn't about the money, it was about the principle. It was about being chosen. Finally, someone had chosen me, and I wasn't going to let them take that away from me. The argument escalated quickly. "You've been fortunate in your business ventures." My mom spat, as if trying to minimize everything I had worked for. But we both know luck and help from others played a significant role in whatever success you've achieved. Her words were cold, dismissive. It wasn't just about the inheritance anymore. It was about invalidating everything I had built for myself, everything I had worked for. I could feel the anger rising in my chest. This wasn't just about the money. It was about my worth, about how they had never truly seen me. I didn't owe them anything, not after everything. I wasn't going to let them define my success by their standards anymore. And yet, despite all that, a part of me wanted their approval, the part that had always longed for their love and recognition, but I wouldn't give in. I walked away from that conversation with my heart heavy. It wasn't just about the inheritance. It was about how my parents had always seen me as second best, always pushed me aside in favor of Sorrel. I didn't just lose the inheritance. I lost the idea that my family would ever see me for who I truly was. I had spent my whole life trying to earn their love, but it was never going to come. That was the moment I knew if I was going to succeed. I had to do it entirely on my own. No more waiting for their approval. No more hoping they would notice me. I was done. The money wasn't the point anymore. The point was that, for the first time in my life, I was going to build something that was mine, without their influence, without their approval, and certainly without their demands. The betrayal stung, but it also gave me the clarity I needed. This was my life, and it was time I took control of it. After the dust settled from that conversation, I did something I'd never done before I stopped caring about their opinion. I wasn't going to be the daughter they ignored anymore, the one they pitied or dismissed. I had made up my mind. The inheritance wasn't just money or jewelry, it was my symbol of independence, a reminder that someone, even if just one person, believed in me. I took the $15,000 from Grandma Vivian's estate and put it to use immediately. It wasn't a fortune by any means, but it was enough to get me started. I had a plan. The idea for Nimbus Solutions had been brewing in my mind for months. It was a software platform that could help small businesses manage their customer relationships without needing to invest in expensive, enterprise-level systems. It was simple, practical, and I believed it could make a real difference for companies that didn't have the resources of the big players. The first few months were a blur of sleepless nights and endless cups of coffee. I worked full-time at my job at a small tech company in downtown Elmwood, and every spare minute I had went into coding, building, and refining Nimbus Solutions. My apartment, the same cramped space I had rented since college, became my sanctuary, my battlefield, and my creative space all rolled into one. I would come home from my day job and work until the early hours of the morning, often skipping meals to get more done. It was exhausting. And at times, I wondered if it was worth it. I had no backup plan. If Nimbus Solutions failed, I would be right back to square one. But deep down, I knew I couldn't fail. Not this time. The first version of the platform was far from perfect. In fact, it was a disaster. The software crashed within hours of being launched, and the handful of early adopters I had convinced to try it were furious. I spent an entire weekend sitting in front of my computer, eyes bloodshot and hands shaking, trying to fix the bugs. I didn't sleep for nearly 48 hours straight. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor at 4 in the morning, my head in my hands, wondering if I had made a huge mistake. Maybe my parents were right. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. Maybe I wasn't special at all. But then I thought of Grandma Vivian's words. Never wait for someone to give you permission to succeed. She had always believed in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself. I couldn't let her down. I couldn't let them define me. I picked myself up, wiped the tears away, and went back to work. That night, I fixed the issues with the software. By morning, Nimbus Solutions was functional again, and I was back on track. As I began to improve the software, I reached out to Diane Reynolds, a successful entrepreneur I had met at a tech networking event. Diane had built her own company from scratch and sold it for millions, and she became my first mentor. At first, she seemed skeptical about my product, but something about my pitch caught her attention. "Your product has potential," she told me over coffee one afternoon. "But you're thinking too small. This could be bigger than you realize." Her guidance was exactly what I needed. She helped me refine my business strategy, sharpen my pitch, and approach clients in a more professional way. With Diane's help, I secured my first major client, a regional chain of 30 fitness centers. They needed exactly what I was offering, and they signed on for a long-term contract. That was my breakthrough. I could finally breathe. With the revenue from my first major client, I was able to quit my day job and focus on Nimbus Solutions full-time. I rented a small office space and hired 2 recent graduates, Rachel and Lucas, both of whom were eager and excited to join a growing company. The 3 of us worked tirelessly, often celebrating small victories with cheap champagne and takeout food. It wasn't glamorous, but it was our dream, and we were building it from the ground up. As the business grew, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of satisfaction. For the first time in my life, I was doing something that mattered, something that was truly mine. I had built it with my own hands, and no one could take that away from me. I didn't need my family's approval. I had created something I was proud of, something that was a testament to my resilience and my refusal to be invisible any longer. I wasn't done yet. There was still so much to do, so many hurdles to overcome. But every day, I felt a little closer to proving to myself and to everyone who had ever doubted me that I was more than capable of succeeding on my own terms. I was no longer the daughter who had been overlooked or dismissed. I was the founder of a growing business, and I was finally in control of my own future. A few months after Nimbus Solutions began to take off, my family returned into my life, but this time, it wasn't for a visit or to offer congratulations. It was all about money, and for the first time, I was fully aware of their intentions. It started with a casual phone call from my mom. At first, it seemed innocent enough. She was surprisingly kind, asking how my business was going, what was new in my life. I hadn't heard from her in months, and I assumed it was simply small talk. But then, as the conversation progressed, her tone shifted subtly at first, like a slow change in the weather that you don't quite notice until it's already storming. "I saw your latest interview in the magazine," she said, her voice warm with a strange edge. "You've really done well for yourself." "Haven't you?" I paused, unsure of how to respond. Her sudden interest felt wrong, like it was leading somewhere I didn't want to go. "Thanks. Mom, it's been a lot of work, but we're making progress." She continued, her tone light but laced with something I couldn't quite place. "Well, I'm glad to hear that. Kalani, I've been thinking a lot about your success lately. You know, your father and I have been struggling a bit with the house. It's a lot for us to manage on our own." I could feel the underlying tension. This was no longer a friendly chat between mother and daughter. It was a preamble, a setup for something I knew all too well. Struggling, I asked, keeping my voice even. "What do you mean?" She hesitated before responding, but I could sense the calculation in her words. "Well, your father's health hasn't been great. He's having some issues with his heart, and that's caused some medical expenses. And the house, the roof needs replacing, and the repairs are just too expensive. Things have been tight. Kalani." Her words were heavy with implication, but I wasn't ready to give in. I knew exactly what she was trying to do. This wasn't a casual update, it was a plea. "Mom, I'm sorry to hear about Dad's health," I said, forcing the words out, my frustration simmering beneath the surface. "But I'm not sure how I can help. I'm working hard on my own business, and I'm just getting things to a point where I can breathe a little easier. I don't have much to give." She sighed dramatically, as if burdened by the weight of the world. "I understand, sweetheart. But, you know, Sorrel and Brian are going through a tough time too. With twins on the way, it's a lot for them to handle, and with everything going on, we just don't know what to do." I felt my stomach tighten. Sorrel, of course. The thought of her always seemed to be woven into the fabric of every conversation they had with me. I could already feel the manipulation creeping in. "I don't know what to tell you. Mom, you and Dad made your choices," I replied, my voice hardening. "And you've always been the ones to overlook me. You've made it clear where your priorities lie." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought she might actually understand, but then she continued, her tone shifting again, this time more insistent. "Well, we've been talking about it, and we think that maybe you could lend a hand. It wouldn't have to be much, just to help with the repairs. We could use a little help with the house. And Sorrel and Brian, well, they're just getting started. Maybe you could think about giving them something for the future." I could feel the anger rising in my chest, and I clenched my fists, trying to keep my calm. This wasn't just about a loan or a temporary favor. It was a calculated attempt to exploit my success, to make me feel responsible for their lack of planning and for Sorrel's poor life choices. "Mom," I said, my voice firm now, "I've worked for everything I have, everything, and I don't owe you or Sorrel anything. I'm not going to be your safety net. I've spent years trying to make you see me, and you've never cared. You've always made it clear I was second best." "I don't think that's a good idea." "Mom," I said, trying to keep my tone even, "you've made it pretty clear that you don't need me at least, not when I was struggling, and now that I'm doing well. Suddenly, you're calling me for help." There was a silence on the line, and I could almost feel her processing my words. Then came the quiet, almost casual response. "I see," she said. "Well, I just thought you might want to help. You know, for the family." I was done. I couldn't let them manipulate me anymore. Couldn't let them use their family card as an excuse to drain me of what I had worked so hard for. I ended the call, my heart pounding in my chest, but that wasn't the end, not by a long shot. The next day, I received a text from Sorrel. She was sweet as always, pretending to care about my life, my work, my success, but it wasn't long before the message turned into another plea for help. We really need your help with the mortgage. Kalani, it's tough, and I know you've done so well. Don't you think it's time to give back to the people who've always been there for you? The audacity, the manipulation, it was suffocating. I deleted the message and blocked her number. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about finally standing up for myself. I wasn't going to let them take advantage of me. I wasn't going to allow myself to be their emotional ATM just because they couldn't handle their own choices. The family's return wasn't one of support or love. It was one of greed and manipulation. They wanted something they didn't deserve, and I wasn't going to give it to them. Not anymore. The moment the letter from Thompson and Blackwell, my family's attorney, arrived, I knew things had gone too far. My parents and Sorrel had finally taken their greed to the next level. It wasn't just about guilt-tripping me anymore. It was about trying to take what they thought was theirs, what I had worked so hard for. The lawsuit claimed that I had made repeated promises to support them financially once I succeeded, citing vague and fabricated conversations that supposedly took place years ago. They even included a handwritten note from Dad, which seemed to twist the truth into something unrecognizable. I stood in my office, staring at the letter in disbelief. They were actually going to sue me. Not only was this a blatant attempt to steal from me, but it was also an emotional betrayal that cut deeper than I could have anticipated. I had already fought so hard to prove myself to them, to finally create something that was all my own. And now they were trying to take it away. It wasn't just a fight for money. It was a fight for my dignity, my independence. I called Gregory Harrison, the attorney who had helped me navigate the sale of Nimbus Solutions to North Star Tech. His calm, no-nonsense approach had always been a source of reassurance for me, and now, more than ever, I needed that. I'm going to help you fight this. Kalani, Gregory said when I told him about the letter. This is an obvious case of extortion dressed up as family obligation. We'll expose them for what they're doing. I felt a surge of relief hearing his words, but the reality of what lay ahead still hung heavily in the air. I had always known that my family was capable of manipulation, but seeing them take such an aggressive step toward getting their hands on my hard-earned success left me shaken. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, endless phone calls, and preparing for the fight of my life. Gregory and his team dug into my family's history, gathering evidence of their previous attempts to manipulate other relatives. There were documents from past disputes that painted a clear picture of my parents' pattern of financial exploitation. We also unearthed Grandma Vivian's old financial records, which revealed just how much Dad's gambling had drained the family's resources over the years. Mom had always covered for him, making excuses for his behavior, but now it was all laid bare. With each new discovery, my resolve grew stronger. I couldn't let them win. This wasn't just about protecting my wealth, it was about ensuring that I was seen as more than just the daughter they could manipulate. I was Kalani Monroe, a self-made businesswoman who had fought tooth and nail to build her company. I wasn't going to let them erase that with a fabricated promise they had twisted for their own gain. The court date arrived, and as I entered the courtroom, I couldn't help but feel a mix of nerves and determination. The courtroom was imposing, the air thick with tension. Mom, Sorrel, and their lawyer were already there, huddled in their corner, exchanging whispers. I felt my heart race as I caught sight of them, but I stood tall. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about proving that I deserved the life I had created. When Mom took the stand, she painted a picture of a loving, supportive mother who had sacrificed everything for my success. The tears she shed as she described how she had pushed me to achieve greatness were almost too much to bear. The lies were so thick it felt like they could suffocate me. She claimed that she had always encouraged my ambition, that everything I had achieved was thanks to her guidance. I could barely hold back my anger as she twisted the truth to suit her narrative. When Sorrel testified, her sobs were timed perfectly, just as I expected. She described the hardships she and Brian were facing, the twins on the way, and how they could barely afford their mortgage. Her performance was Oscar-worthy, but the cynic in me saw right through it. This wasn't about the twins or her struggles, it was about her trying to get her hands on my success. But then it was my turn, as Gregory led me through my testimony. I couldn't help but feel the weight of everything I had fought for. Gregory presented the evidence methodically, showing that I had never received financial assistance from my parents and that I had built Nimbus Solutions entirely on my own. We also introduced the financial records from Grandma Vivian's estate, showing how much Dad's gambling addiction had drained the family. It was clear that my parents had used their claims of family responsibility to manipulate me, and now they were trying to do the same with my success. When it came time for the judge to render her decision, I held my breath. Kata. Judge Kathleen Harris had been taking notes throughout the proceedings, her gaze shifting between us as we presented our cases. She turned to Mom and Sorrel, her expression stern. Mrs. Lancaster, your claims are not only unsubstantiated but are also based on a history of financial manipulation that has been clearly documented. Your attempt to exploit your daughter for financial gain is not only unethical but also legally unfounded. There is no evidence of a verbal contract, and even if there had been, it would not be enforceable in this case. I felt a wave of relief wash over me as the judge turned to me. Miss Monroe, you have done an admirable job of proving that your success is entirely the result of your own efforts. I find no merit in the claims against you. The lawsuit is dismissed. For the first time in years, I felt free. The battle was over, and I had won. It wasn't just a legal victory. It was a personal one. I had stood up for myself, for everything I had worked for, and for the dignity I had so long been denied. My family may have tried to tear me down, but I had proven that nothing could take away what was mine. The months following the legal victory were a whirlwind of change, and with that change came a newfound sense of peace I hadn't known in years. After the court ruling, I felt the weight of years of emotional strain lift from my shoulders. The truth had been laid bare, and I no longer needed to prove my worth to anyone, least of all my family. It was as if a door had opened, and I stepped through, finally free to live on my own terms. I threw myself even further into Nimbus Solutions, expanding the company at a pace I had only dreamed of before, without the distraction of my family's demands. I had the mental clarity to focus on what truly mattered, building something that would endure, something that was entirely mine. We brought in new clients, expanded our platform, and hired a talented team that was just as dedicated to the mission as I was. I wasn't just a business owner anymore. I was a leader, creating a company that was changing lives, helping small businesses thrive without the need for massive enterprise-level investments. But the transformation wasn't just professional, it was personal too. I realized that I had spent so much time building a career, proving myself to everyone around me, that I had neglected my own personal well-being. For so long, my self-worth had been tangled in my family's approval, or lack thereof. Now, with that toxic influence gone, I began to rebuild my life in a way that nourished me not just professionally, but emotionally as well. I reconnected with old friends who had supported me from afar, and I made time to build new relationships with people who respected me for who I was, not for what I could give them. One of the first things I did was reach out to Alyssa, my college roommate, who had always been there for me during the darkest days. We met up in Boston for coffee, and it felt like the weight of years of loneliness and rejection was starting to fall away. "You're really doing it." "Huh," she said, grinning as we caught up. "You've come so far. Kalani, you've got everything now: your company, your independence, your peace." I smiled, a warm sense of pride filling me. I'm finally getting to live the life I wanted. Alyssa, a life I never thought I could have. It wasn't just the professional success that filled me with pride. It was knowing that I had learned to trust myself, to believe in my own abilities and not rely on anyone else's approval. For the first time in my life, I felt truly content with who I was. In the midst of my personal and professional transformation, I also decided to give back. Grandma Vivian's legacy had always been about helping others, and I knew I wanted to carry that torch forward. I launched the Vivian Carrington Foundation, dedicated to supporting young women entrepreneurs who, like me, didn't have the financial backing or family support to get their dreams off the ground. The first recipient of our seed fund was a young woman named Maya, a single mother who had developed an innovative app for childcare. Seeing her face light up when we awarded her the grant was the most fulfilling moment I had experienced in years. It felt good to give back, to help someone else build their dream as Grandma Vivian had helped me. But it wasn't just about charity or business anymore. I was also learning to take time for myself, to enjoy life outside of work. I bought a beautiful home in Chestnut Hill, a quiet neighborhood just outside Boston, with sprawling gardens and a large kitchen that reminded me of Grandma Vivian's house. It was a place that felt like mine, truly mine for the first time. I spent weekends gardening, cooking meals for friends, and simply relaxing. I had made peace with myself, and for the first time in my life, I understood the true meaning of happiness. It was in building something that mattered. Yes, but also in finding balance, in nurturing relationships, and in creating a life that was fulfilling in every way. When Nathan returned to Boston for work, we reconnected. We'd kept in touch over the years, but I realized that the relationship I had once hoped for wasn't meant to be. What we shared was deep, but it had been more about mutual respect than romantic love. Still, the connection we had was meaningful, and as we spent time together, I realized just how far we had both come. We had both learned to live for ourselves, and in doing so, we were able to offer support to each other without the pressure of trying to fit into old expectations. I wasn't alone anymore. I had surrounded myself with people who valued me for who I truly was, and for the first time in my life, I understood the power of being true to yourself, of carving out your own path and not relying on anyone else's approval. The life I had always dreamed of was now a reality, and this new beginning, one that was founded on my terms, was everything I had ever wanted. As I stood in my garden, the evening sun casting a soft glow over the flowers, I realized something profound. The years of fighting for approval, the pain of family betrayal, and the constant push to prove myself were behind me. I had built a life that was entirely my own, free from the expectations and manipulation that had once defined me. Looking back, I understood that peace wasn't something to be fought for, it was something to be found within myself. The freedom I had gained wasn't just financial or professional, it was emotional. I had stopped seeking validation from people who could never give it to me, and in doing so, I found the strength to live authentically. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, I felt prepared. My journey had taught me that true peace comes from embracing who you are and letting go of the need to be accepted by those who will never understand. This story is a powerful reminder that true independence comes not from financial success or recognition, but from the ability to reclaim your life from the people and circumstances that try to define you. It teaches us the importance of self-worth, the value of setting boundaries, and the courage to stand up for ourselves, even when it feels like we're fighting against everything we've known. The journey to peace and freedom isn't easy, but it is possible when we stop seeking validation from toxic relationships and start valuing our own voice and choices. This story is a work of fiction created for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to attack or defame any individual, family, or organization. Any resemblance to real persons or events is purely coincidental. If this story moved you or sparked a thought, please let us know by commenting below. Your likes, shares, and subscriptions help us create more stories that inspire and entertain. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching and being part of our community.